All right, at this time, I'd like to call to order the Paris Union High School District Special Board Meeting to order at 5 o'clock. That was kind of hard. At this time, item 3.1, Pledge of Allegiance. If you all stand, please. Next item is 4.1, Invitation to address the Board of Trustees.
No takers.
Thank you, sir. Item 5.1, Curriculum Public Hearing for the Local Control Accountability Plan and Annual Update for 2019-2020.
Yeah, but there's no vote until they give us the LCAP presentations. That's why we're here today.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, President Garcia and the board, as well as the cabinet, want to just come before you today with our LCAP annual update. I think throughout the year, we provided annual updates in regards to our progress with our LCAP. Today, in particular, we come with our annual update to provide an update in regards to the services that we're providing to support our students for next year. Okay, so our LCAP is aligned with our vision and mission as a district. A few years ago, we worked collectively to develop a mission and a vision with all different stakeholders that kind of developed the mission and the vision that we have in front of us. In regards to our vision and our mission statement, they're operationalized in specific goals that we have developed to really support students in regards to services that we provide. And this is what we align all the services and how we spend our funding to support kids in regards to goal 1, that all students will attain grade level proficiency in ELA and math. Goal 2, all students will graduate from high school prepared for post-secondary and career options. And goal 3 is what we all desire for all departments and sites to have a safe and positive environment for staff and students. And lastly, goal 4 is to secure and strengthen home, school, community connections and communication. So we've had throughout the year different directors come up and provide you updates in regards to our progress with each of the individual goals. And today, likewise, we will have different directors come up and provide an annual update in terms of what our focus areas will be for next year. And so for goal 1, we'll have Charles Tippie, Director of Learning Support. We'll have goal 2 will be Julie Zero. She'll come up, and our Director of Curriculum Instruction, and talk specifically about what we're doing for goal 2. Robert Bruff will come up and speak, our Director of Pupil Services, about goal 3. And then Diane Martin will close us out, Director of Learning Support, in regards to the work we're doing, homeschool, community connections, and families. Now, previously, the work around those goals, the indicators around those goals, we've kind of had the local flexibility to make those determinations. But, you know, over the past few years, the state has developed California Dashboard, and they have directly given us what are those specific indicators that we should be targeting to support our schools, and also determining progress as it relates to our LCAP. And so today, as individuals come up, we'll start identifying specifically our LCAP goals, along with the alignment to the California Dashboard and the actions and services that we're currently providing, okay? So with that, I'll hand the mic over to Charles Tippie, and we'll get started.
And as Dr. Newman mentioned, goal number 1 is focused on academic achievement. There are 3 primary indicators in this goal, the English language arts, mathematics, and progress of how our English learners are doing towards proficiency on the English learner assessment and towards reclassification. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. And we're starting off with looking at the academic indicators for ELA and math. These are strictly based on the Smarter Balanced assessments in ELA and math. Students take these tests in grades 3 through 8 and once again in grade 11. And this is set up on a vertical scale so that as students progress through the grade levels, they should be progressing through mastery of the standards all the way through 11th grade, getting ready for college and career readiness. You focus your attention towards the right. There's 4 different performance levels on the Smarter Balanced assessments. What's highlighted in the square there are the minimum scores that students need to be considered standard met. And the way that the dashboard is set up is it looks at the distance that every student is either below or above that minimum threshold score. So I have examples up here. These are for the 11th grade ELA assessment. And the minimum score that a student needs to be standard met on that assessment is a 2583. I had here student number 1 scored 2573. So that student is negative 10 points from that minimum score needed for standard met. Student number 2 is a 2593, and that student would be 10 points above the minimum threshold score. Student 3, 2583, their distance from standard is a 0. Student 4, 2580, is 3 points less than the 2583. Student 5, 2553 would be negative 30. And then what they do is they average those distance from standard scores, and they do that for the state, the county, the school district, the school, and for individual subgroups. And that's what's used for the academic indicator that determines what goes on our dashboard. Really, really important that I point out right now that what we're looking at here and the annual updates that we provided through the school year, these are based on the test scores that the students took a little over a year ago. So these are based on the 2017-18 test scores that students took in April, May of 2018. So this data is about a year old. I'm happy to report our scores are coming in right now, and we're seeing double-digit gains, anywhere from 15 to 35 point increases for our different high schools. Middle school scores are not in yet, so we're still waiting on those. But this current year, 18-19, is looking a lot better than this. But to recap what we saw before, overall in ELA, our district was 34.8 points below standard. So just like the example I showed you, we were 34 points below on average, and we had declined 12.8 points from the previous year in 16-17. Our numerically significant subgroups had struggles as well, so you can see all these groups were in red, and that's based on how high the score or the subgroup was scoring and how they changed from the previous year. Yes, sir.
Those are also broken down by school site?
By school site as well, yes.
Does that include CMI?
CMI is counted as its own entity on the dashboard, so they're not included in our district scores. They're a separate charter school for the dashboard. One of the changes this year, the state added in 8th grade or 11th grade scores. Previously, it was just 3 through 8. This year, it included 11th grade scores, so we have some additional subgroups. Our Asian and Filipino students did well. Important to note that there's less than 40 students in those subgroups for the academic indicator. And for mathematics, our district as a whole, we were at a very low status at 112.7 points below standard, and we had a 0 change from last year. So that's once again comparing 17-18 scores to 16-17 scores. Our 18-19 scores are looking like they're going to increase significantly from last year's. Similar from ELA, we struggled with all of our different subgroups. The only exception would be the Filipino and Asian students with a green status. The third indicator for goal number 1 is the English Learner Progress Indicator. This looks at students' performance on the English Language Proficiency Assessments, the LCAP, and the percentage of students that are reclassifying. Last year was the very first year, 17-18 was the first year that the new English Language Proficiency Assessment was administered across the state. So this was a baseline year. So really this is the data that we have for the district. We have 37% of our students scored in level 4, and that's not a lot of information. If you look at the chart on the right, This compares our district to all of the other districts in the county, and we did really well. We were tied for third place across the county. Changes that are addressed in the LCAP in terms of goal number 1, no changes to the goal itself. The metric, the only change in that was that it once again included the 11th grade scores into the 3 through 8 and combined that into 1. New actions and services. This is basically we sat together and worked on organizing the different initiatives and services, and I'll talk a little bit more about these now. So the first one was to provide training and support for literacy across the curriculum in all content areas. Our services for that would be to staff 2 literacy coaches and 4 additional math coaches to provide instructional support for our teachers. We're going to continue on with district-wide summer school, and we still have planned the 2 days of professional development where we have different training for our teachers on literacy across the curriculum, professional support in MTSS. We have a lot of things planned for that. For 1.2, we'll be providing training and support to increase rigor and relevance in ELA, math, science, and social studies. Through we have an instructional science TOSA that's tackling the NGSS science standard implementation. For additional math teachers to provide additional support sections at a reduced class size, and continued support for professional development. 1.3, support the implementation of multi-tiered system of support. We added 2 additional program specialists to support our students with disabilities, and we're continuing to reduce class size for intervention courses, and not just to reduce class size, but to give teachers more of an opportunity to provide small group interventions for our students and to better monitor their performance. And 1.4, continue the great work that we've done with our educational technology initiatives. 1.5 addresses how we'll support our English learners. We have continued class size reduction. One of the program compliance requirements we have for our English learners is to continuously monitor their progress on the ELD standards and make sure that we're providing interventions. We have additional teachers released to support the instructional process. We've already implemented instructional coaching for our designated English 3D program, and we have our EL TOSA and an instructional coach come in and work with teachers on better supporting our English learners. And intentional trainings on the LPAC, which is the assessment for our EL students. And we also meet with counselors, administrators, and teacher leads once a month, with the exception of the January months, to talk about instructional strategies for our students. So those are the main actions and services that address goal number 1. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Zero.
All right, good evening. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about goal number 2, which focuses on college and career readiness for our students. The dashboard indicators that we focus on with this are graduation rate as well as the college and career readiness indicator. And then our local indicators that we focus on are A to G completion, AP pass rate, our EAP scores, which are those scores from the CASP that tell if our students have met the standard for being prepared, FAFSA completion, as well as AVID participation. When we're looking at the graduation and the dashboard and how we did this year, we did have a slight decrease in graduation, not by very much, about 1%. And when you look at our overall subgroups, you'll see that some of the groups that struggled a little bit are the ones that kind of fluctuate quite a bit. Last year we had an increase in students with disability, and then this year dashboard did show a slight decrease. When you look at some of our other subgroups, we maintained with the socioeconomically disadvantaged students. We also showed some growth in our African American students, which we've seen that in 2 years in a row. We've seen a nice increase there. So we're in the green status with both our African American and our Hispanic students. The other dashboard indicator that we focus on for goal 2 is the college and career readiness dashboard. Here we maintained, so when we compare last year to this year, we just maintained, we did have a slight increase of about 0.5%. And when you look at our overall indicators with our subgroups, you'll see that we did have some decreases a little bit with some of our subgroups, specifically with our English learners, our African American students, foster youth, and students with disabilities. And some of this is we really need to continue to look at the programs and how we're getting students in those programs. It really comes back to the equity and how we focus on improving that with our students. And I think that we've done a really good job of taking some steps to show those improvements. And we just need to continue to strive to improving those areas with those subgroups. And then we did see that we maintained with our white population and also showed a slight decrease with the Filipino students as well. Yes.
We have one middle school, the rest of the districts, feeder districts provide the middle school level, right?
Correct.
Is there any research that shows that our middle school is doing as well or better than any of the middle schools from our feeder districts?
When looking at what in particular?
Well, I think particularly in the area of math, because it's an area where we're moving into the abstract with algebra, and kids are freaking out because all of a sudden they're having to think with letters and they're inserted with their numbers, and it's just, and I'm wondering if perhaps one of the places that we could look at to improve would be at the introduction of that to have more interventions at that particular level. And I'm thinking that would require us to more closely work with the feeder districts in that area. I'm just wondering if having seen this, experienced it personally with my family, I see where you're going from the concrete to the abstract is a very difficult thing to do, to transition. And it seems to me that there are ways of introducing the students into the more abstract by kind of an easier transition. I know that as a kindergarten and first grade teacher, we do teach algebra, but we're not using the letters. We're using blank lines and boxes and circles.
Yeah.
So once maybe we need to start thinking about slowly bringing them in instead of all of a sudden you dumping it with A, X, and Y.
Yeah, so we do collaborate with our feeder districts. We have worked more with Menifee than the other districts. A majority of our students do come from Menifee, and then Heritage feeds mostly from Roma Land School District, and then we have some students that come from Newview. So we do try and work closely with those feeder districts to ensure those transitions are smooth for them. I think one of the challenges is that we do have the 4 different feeder districts into our district, and supporting those transitions for all of those students can be challenging at times, but I think we've definitely gotten better with the collaboration with our feeder districts, which is making it a better transition for our students. But we also see that not all the districts have the same course pathways when we look at math, and so sometimes that can be a challenge. So we do see that the scores vary from district to district and how those transitions happen. We get to see a lot of that as we do the placement for students as they come into the high schools. So they are placed appropriately based on their test scores, teacher recommendations, as well as their grades. So they're not just placed based on one indicator as well.
Okay, thank you.
So for our local indicators, we look at our AVID enrollment. We did have a slight decrease in AVID enrollment this year. We do see that there's probably some correlation into one of our feeder districts dropping AVID as one of their programs. And so the recruitment process got a little bit more difficult in regards to the AVID recruitment for those incoming 9th graders. But there's been a lot of work done with all of the AVID coordinators and the feeder districts coming for this year. So we anticipate we'll see some growth with that enrollment for the incoming 9th graders this coming year. But as you can see, the AVID participation, we look at the students that participate in AVID. We have a 100% graduation rate over the last 3 years with students that have ever participated in AVID. And we definitely see a higher percentage of students within the AVID program meeting the A to G requirements. Then another local indicator is our advanced placement analysis. This looks at our enrollment as well as the test scores. And we did see an increase this year in the passing rate for our students, up to 29%. And we really did focus on a lot of additional interventions to support those students as we worked with them, preparing them for the test. And we saw a lot of great collaboration at the school sites, really encouraging students to participate in the AP readiness, which was put on by the county. Last year, Paloma led the county in the number of students that participated in the AP readiness. So it's a tribute to the hard work that they're really doing to try and support kids getting better scores on the AP exam. And then FAFSA completion, when we look at last year, we finished off the year with a combined of 65.4% of our students completing the FAFSA. The way it looks right now, when we're looking at our projections for next year, currently we're at about 75% completion at this moment in time. They do have through the end of the school year to complete the FAFSA. As a county, they only look at the completion by March 2nd when they look at the overall dashboard and the competition that they do amongst the county. But we definitely saw some really big growth in a couple of schools. Paris High, they jumped up about 10% the way it looks right now with FAFSA completion. So a lot of hard work has been happening at the school sites to increase that completion. And one thing is we really see that dollar amount increase for our students that might not otherwise be able to afford to go to college. And I think that's really where that push comes from is we really want to provide opportunities for students. And so really working on that messaging with our parent population to ensure that our parents are filling out the FAFSA and providing the best possible opportunity for their student to go to college. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, and CTE program, so any type of certificate program. It doesn't necessarily have to be an associate's or a bachelor's degree that they're going to school for. The FAFSA can also help support those CTE programs as well. Which is why it's really important that we make sure that we message everything with parents, especially with some of our undocumented parents. There's also opportunities for funding for them as well. So we want to make sure that parents feel comfortable filling out the FAFSA as we go through those processes. So this is just a 3-year overview of the college and career readiness. We talked a little bit about this last month as well, that we did see an increase in the number of students that are prepared. So that's that top column. And this is what is included is when we look at the college and career readiness indicators, this is it as a combination. So you're looking at A to G completion, dual enrollment, AP, leadership, which is the military pathway for 2 years, the seal of bioliteracy, CT pathways, as well as the AP participation and the scoring a 3 or higher on the AP exam. So continuing to really focus on that, we'll be adding at least 3 additional courses in the district for dual enrollment this coming year, provided by MSJC. And looking to also include a CNA program at Paris High. So an opportunity for students to also complete a program. And basically after they complete that program, they're ready to go out and get a job with that certificate. So it's kind of an intense program, but it will provide a lot of opportunities for students, and it really suits Paris High well with the medical pathway that they have at their school site currently. And then when we look at our overall actions and services, and this is kind of what we look at for how we provide our funding and our services, and so there's no changes to our current goal. We didn't change any of our metrics moving forward. And so we look at our new actions and services, and we really just took a look at how these fit into the college and career readiness program and some of the things that we need to address. And so we kind of streamlined it a little bit more with some of the changes to our actions and services. So when we look at our actions and services, our first action and services is to provide expanded opportunities for remediation, acceleration, enrichment to college and career readiness. This is really where we look at how we provide support for a 7-period day, increasing the CTE pathways, summer school remediation and acceleration opportunities, as well as credit recovery options during the school day. For 2.2, it's providing opportunities and support for high school students to take college-level coursework. This comes back to those opportunities with dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment for our students, increased enrollment in AP courses, also providing opportunities for students to get support that are taking AP courses. So it might be a workshop on Saturdays, the AP readiness at UCR, and then also some collaboration with the community colleges to establish articulation agreements, which also provide college credit for students as well. 2.3, provide expanded opportunities for students to participate and complete CTE pathways. We've continued to focus on providing pathways that our students are interested in. We've also added some support in the area of having a coordinator of ed services to support the implementation and the development of our pathways, as well as the articulation agreements. And then also providing professional development for teachers that support CTE pathways. And then 2.4, providing funding, training, and support to build and maintain comprehensive counseling program to support college and career readiness. We do high school transcript analysis with all of our 11th grade, 12th grade students. We do this on a yearly basis to ensure that our students are on track to meet the A to G requirements and are prepared for college. We also provide some professional development for counselors. We've really focused on providing a lot of opportunities for them to increase their tool belt, and supporting students with preparing them for the best possible opportunity for college. Sometimes it's not always a 4-year college. It might be a 2-year program. As you mentioned, it might also be a certificate program or a CTE pathway. And then also we have provided college and career readiness counselors at the 3 comprehensive high schools, which has really allowed a lot of students to get additional support with college applications. Our goal as a district is to have every student fill out 3 college applications, and that can be a 4-year college application or a community college application or a trade school application, but we want to make sure that all kids are filling out those applications and having a plan for post-secondary. And then the final one is provide training and support for students to develop the college and career readiness skills necessary for success in high school and post-secondary education. We provide the PSAT for all of our 8th and 10th grade students, as well as our 11th grade students that are on track for A to G completion. We also have college and career readiness assessments that all of our students take throughout their time with us. So we have assessments that specifically the middle school students take, as well as what the high school take each year as they transition through high school. And really the goal of those assessments and those inventories is to provide kids with an assessment of what their interests are and what kind of career goals might match those assessments, as well as their interests and the income that they would like to have for their future. And so it really provides a lot of really good feedback to them so they can help make those decisions before they get to their senior year. And yeah.
You said something about you wanting students to be filling out 3 college applications. Is there something available to them, or let them know about help with paying for those applications? Because I know it costs some fees for filling those out. And if somebody is being told they need to fill out 3 applications, what if they don't have money for it?
Well, the community college applications, all of those are free for students to fill out. But as far as the 4-year colleges, a lot of the private schools will also provide waivers, and then students that are on free and reduced lunch, they get the waivers for some of the 4-year college applications. Absolutely. And then just the final 2 points is just to the continued recruitment and retention of students in AVID, as well as just providing workshops and field trips for students that are not in AVID. We've done a lot of outreach to our parents and our students that don't participate in AVID, and to ensure that they're getting that same experience that our AVID students get. And probably the best feedback that we've gotten is the opportunity to take parents on these field trips also. I think it's really opened up the eyes to parents when they actually get to go on those field trips with their students. They get to ask questions. Sometimes that parents are really hesitant to allow their kids to go away to school, so it really provides an opportunity for parents to see what that looks like getting on a college campus and asking a lot of questions. So that kind of encompasses what we cover in Goal 2. So I'm going to hand it off to Bob for Goal 3.
Well, as my colleagues have talked about college and career readiness and the test scores and the learning evidence that were so important, all of that sort of stands on the back of school safety and having a place where kids feel welcome and safe and comfortable, and we're confident that we've provided that this year. The indicators that we look at for this are chronic absenteeism, suspension rates, our local climate survey, and then some local indicators of expulsion rates, dropout, high school dropout, attendance rates, and our annual Williams report. If we look at that first one for chronic absenteeism, this is a challenging one, particularly since, as most of you know, they've changed the rules this year that high school isn't part of this measurement for the dashboard. It's only your middle school. We happen to have one middle school. So it really comes down to our dashboard being a result of 7th and 8th grade in Pinacati. There have been several changes. We're probably going to see an uptick in chronic absenteeism across the state. We talked to you a little bit about this earlier in the year, that they changed the rules. Saturday school no longer takes a day off of chronic absenteeism. It is a day we can recoup for ADA, which is very important. So Saturday school will always remain an important goal to get kids in and help with the funding issues, but it doesn't take a day off for chronic absenteeism. The other rule change that took place this year was that if a student is absent, say 5 or 6 days, you can no longer drop them back if you find out they moved to the last day of attendance. You now have to drop them either when they're picked up in CalPADS by a new school, or if you do the day you do the home visit. In the past, if we did a home visit, we could say, oh, we found out you've moved, drop you back the 5 days that you were gone. We can no longer do that. So it's a little bit more of a daunting task, but it's still a task that we really need to focus on. We'll give you a full-length report on attendance in the fall. We're particularly intrigued by looking at our mobility data, particularly at Pinacati Middle School. And as you know, that's one of the highest factors in Hattie's results, one of the most negative factors. And we found out, I just did some research recently, that our mobility kids have a chronic absenteeism rate of almost 67%. Whereas our regular kids who attend all year, it's only 14%. So they're going to be a real area of focus next year. But we'll give you a real in-depth report about that in the fall when we give you an overview of attendance. There's great news to report to you on our suspension rates. What you're looking at here in the orange is, again, 17-18 data. This year in 18-19, we have truly doubled down on a multi-tiered systems of support, our alternative to suspension at Pinacati and Paris. There's been about a 28% reduction in suspensions. For second and third offenses, we're looking at a 19% reduction, which is very powerful. That means when kids are getting in trouble that first time, those interventions and the work that we're doing from counselors to campus supervisors to administrators are really, really making a difference. In particular, one of our most disparate groups, African Americans, are down 2.2%. So we're very encouraged by that data. And we'll come back to that a little bit. If we look at our attendance rate overall, traditionally you've looked at ADA. We talked about that a little bit last time. Overall, attendance rate's about 94.53. Attendance, ADA to attendance, 92.63. So there is a great deal of work to do in terms of attendance. But I'm very pleased to report the middle bracket of our expulsion rate. We've gone from 22 expulsions last year to only 11 this year. And I think of the big 5, those truly dangerous ones, there's been only one that's been brought to the board, and that was a rather unusual one that I think you all remember that that student encountered. So we've had a 50% reduction in our expulsion rate. And we, again, credit that to our digging in and really doing those multi-tiered systems of supports. Our dropout rate has remained consistent. The 5% was met, and our middle school dropout rate is met the 0.1 expectation. So those have kind of clocked along at a steady rate. If we look at our annual Williams report, we had 0 findings, which is always wonderful to see. We've had an uptick in our Healthy Kids survey. Last year, we surveyed 4,259 students, and this year, an additional 300 or so. We're up to 4,594. So if we look at what is the real focus for next year, is to really double down on, again, our multi-tiered systems of support, making sure that all kids are getting that tier 1 and that we're really identifying in a systematic way those tier 2 kids. And I I think we're gonna be talking a lot to you about those mobility kids who are suffering so much trauma. One of the things we're particularly excited about is the MOU that you all signed, I think a month ago, with Cal Baptist University, that we have a partnership with them. As you know, you approved that as a board, and we're going to have social workers at every school, hopefully 2 at Pinacati and 2 at Paris. And we want them to focus on those Tier 2 students who are carrying such trauma, that are having such issues of poverty, those mobility issues that we've been talking about, that they are just really needy children. Yes, sir.
Can you give us more of a little bit more in depth of what those social workers will be doing? Because, you know, there's a perception that social workers come and all they do is get kids away from parents and family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question. So social workers, I think that has been our traditional mindset. But counselors, you know, have what's 600 to 1. They're doing a lot of academic counseling. They are also doing that daily triaging. But social workers are trained in trauma counseling. You signed an MOU for something called Care Solace, which is where we can refer students out to make sure that we're not just giving them a referral for mental health, but are they actually getting the appointments? Are they actually getting the services? Well, that can be very daunting for some of our families, the bureaucracy, the paperwork. If you've ever navigated that yourself, we're school people and it's hard. So a social worker can actually hold a family's hand and say, let me drive you over to DPSS, or let me help you fill that paperwork out, or, you know, they really are trained in trauma and therapy, not in just academic counseling. I know that's a quick answer, because
No, that's great, actually. Out of curiosity, is that gonna cost us more, or is that where the AB 18 money comes in?
well,
What exactly?
the beauty of this is the MOU signed, these are social work interns, so we're getting free labor. They have to do 429 hours to get their credentials. So they're young, energetic, they really want to, so free is the cost. We're very excited about that. I think Ms. Raines is very excited about that as well. Yes, sir.
When you talk about mobility students, is there any kind of a breakout between those who are foster children and those who belong to families, say, a single parent that keeps going back and forth from one district to another?
Absolutely, and that's some of the deep digging that we're gonna have to do this summer, because we're really interested. I'll be working with Mr. Bobbitt, and we're looking at those kinds of breaking down what mobility means. These are the students that come after the first day or don't finish the first year. Those of you that are parents, most of us as educators, we don't move our kids into school in October or in February or March. We do that over the summer or maybe over Christmas break, but you know, it's terrible for kids to move in the mid-year.
That's the teacher had experience with Lee Valley, you know, you had kids that would be in your class for 12 months and then you go to Paris Elementary and then maybe a few months later they come back because of the family situation.
It's very traumatic for kids. It's the #1 negative thing according to Hattie's research. So we're hoping to give you, we need to really do some deep dives on that mobility data this summer and try to fill you in on our plan with that. So in a nutshell, those are the real, to double down on MTSS, to really utilize some of our social workers for some of those trauma kids, and to make sure that we're keeping our campuses safe and good places to learn and be. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Ms. Martin.
Okay. I'm bringing it home, guys. We're almost there. So LCAP Goal 4 does not have a dashboard indicator, so we've created our local indicators as you see above, and going along with the theme of this evening, our first local indicator, which is our parent participation. We always seem to have, we have some nice increases over the year. We also provide a varied types of workshops and trainings for our parents. I think this year our focus was a lot on mental health and wellness for our students. We're going to continue. We had a lot of positive feedback, so we continue to see a lot of participation across the district at all of our facilities that are offering trainings and workshops and conferences. And of course, I want to thank you, those of you that attended the gala. So that was kind of our culminating activity to recognize a lot of the hard work that our parents that are participating across the district as volunteer and completing some of our Project Inspire from CABE to be recognized at that event. So thank you for those of you that came. When we're looking at our parent participation for our Community Advisory Committee, we've had this on here. It's really working with Emil now, who will be our Director of Special Ed next year, is to try to get another representative to serve on the Committee for Advisory for Special Ed. So we have one standing lovely young person from Paloma. We're going to get one more, and Emil's already identified somebody for that position. So we're looking forward to have 2 folks serving on that committee. The last one is a work in progress. Right now, the link is still open for our California School Parent Survey. This goes along with the California Healthy Kids Survey that Mr. Bruff was talking about. There is a component for the parents to complete. So we did not meet this goal as of today, but the link is still open for 3 weeks. So when we do our final LCAP for your approval on June 19th, we'll update this number. So we're hoping to at least get well over 543 responses, which is what we had last year. Our IC portal, which is part of our Infinite Campus, talking with Mr. Bobbitt. IC apparently pulled this report from our program, and it will be uploaded again on Saturday. So we'll be able to get numbers for you, which we'll include in the final LCAP on June 19th. We continue to see increases in our social media access across the board. So we're very excited to see folks remain connected in this way for social media. So we're very excited, and we'll continue to follow this. I believe that Haiku will be dropped for next year. We're going to be switching over to Canvas, and we'll be including that as well as ParentLink. We'll be dropping that app as well. So we won't be including those in future metrics as we move forward. So we're not going to make any changes to our LCAP Goal 4, no changes to the goal. Actions and services remain the same except for 4.1. Our goal for 4.1 is to really focus on building capacity of our educators and working with families. We feel that over the course of time, as we need to help build those strategies and our teachers' tool belt, their bag of tricks to be able to build positive relationships with families. And so we're looking to create a focus group with teachers throughout the year so that we can identify ways that teachers can collaborate with families in a positive way, instead of having the calls that tend to go home that are, your child did not do this. We want to be able to kind of turn that around. 4.2, we will continue. This is one of our biggest areas, is providing workshops and trainings for our parents and our community members. Our goal is to continue to work with Mr. Bruff as we get feedback from our Healthy Kids survey to focus a lot on vaping, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, as well as mental health and anxiety. So that we see a big increase in parents wanting more information on that. So we'll continue to provide those workshops throughout the district as well. 4.3, we have our community engagement specialist. She spearheads and works with the community aides across the district to integrate the resources from the county and the city. So her work is really working on that with our community aides. The last one, ensure that schools have a system in place with multiple strategies. This kind of goes into 4.1, but we continue to use parts of Blackboard, and we'll be using Canvas and PeachJar to continue to share information both ways. So with that, just the last thing I just want to share is that through this whole process, we've been working with Riverside County Office of Education through their FastPass system. So what we've done as a district is we've submitted the draft of our LCAP to the county. It has gone through 2 reviews with multiple feedbacks. We've made those changes in the document that you're going to be approving or that you're going to be looking at tonight. So any input that we have from the board or from our stakeholders or any input that we have from the final compliance review from the county will be shared with us, and we'll make those changes prior to the June 19th final approval for the LCAP. We anticipate very minor changes. It might be just dotting I's, formatting. We've fixed and adjusted any of the major items that they found as far as compliance. So as far as our next steps, June 19th is the final approval. And any input or any feedback that we get tonight, we'll make those adjustments as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions for any of us. Oh.
When I started my career teaching, I made a lot of home visits, and we had a community liaison and so forth and so forth. Now we seem to, and noticeably, are depending upon more of a technological method for this kind of thing. How do we add into the personal touch with this technology and yet stay safe?
So I'll just share that, we have 2 attendance specialists that also do the home visits. Yep.
375 home visits this year. One of the challenges with certain areas of our city is that where they can't go out alone, so they do often have to go out in pairs.
Right.
And it's a safety issue for them, but there is that personal touch. And we're also hoping that social workers will be able to make some of those visits, and they won't be just embedded in the school, but could also make home visits with administrators or others, or myself.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
that human component is
Yep.
the most important.
Both ends.
Yeah, seeing your presentation versus reading your actual report here, I have a couple of questions. I think Julie touched on the fact that, or she may not, Paris Lake High School they only need 185 credits to graduate there. But that means they can only go to a 2-year college. Correct. Junior college. Where do they make up that difference in remedial classes at the college that they go to if they were to go to the 2-year college?
If they need them. Oftentimes our students are in alternative programs, sometimes for outside issues not related to their ability. And so sometimes kids can go to the community college and they can go directly into college credit classes. So not necessarily do they miss out on starting with those classes. Yeah. They take an assessment, but they also are using more multiple measures now. So it's not just based on an assessment that they take. Yeah. So there's been a lot of shifts that are taking place at the community colleges right now in regards to how they're placed. They are moving away from a lot of remedial classes and really trying to get students placed in those credit-bearing classes because, like you're saying, it is very discouraging if you're taking a semester-length class and you're not getting any credit for it. So that there has been a lot of shifts in how they're placed and the multiple measures and how students are able to take those credit-bearing classes. And they're really working on implementing a lot more supports so that students are successful. There's been a couple of shifts at the state level where they've approved some bills that are actually really pushing the community colleges to ensure that students are getting through in 2 years if they're going to college full-time. They're not, they're kind of being held to a little bit more accountable than they have in the past to ensure that students are completing and moving on to the next level rather than kind of stalling out, which we see there's a difference between community college and the 4-year college as far as the matriculation process and the success in the end on how long it might take students to complete their degree. Oftentimes we've seen a shift happening recently in that because of some of these changes at the state level with just the outreach that particularly MSJC, because that's the community college we specifically work with, that they're doing a lot more outreach to try and support that matriculation process from us to them as well as them to the 4-year college. Yeah, so we have access to something called the National Clearinghouse. It's Student Tracker. It actually is a data system that keeps track of our students beyond high school. So after our students graduate and they go to any college, there's very few colleges that opt out of being included in this data system because it also supports them as well to look at their own data. And so it actually, so when I talk about the college going rate, when we get that percentage, that college going rate comes straight from the Student Tracker. So it looks at all the students that we had as graduates and which students showed up in college the following year. And they look at community colleges, 4-year colleges, private schools, trade programs, and then they give us that number. And it's not just the overall number, they actually get it down to the student level. So we can go back and look at particular students also and see, oftentimes we'll have students say, I'm going to this college, and then when we get the student tracker report, we actually go through and look at individual students. We provide those reports to the school sites so they can look at their own data. And oftentimes, we'll have the counselors, they'll actually get on the phone and call students and say, hey, what happened? You were supposed to go to Cal Poly, and I see you didn't show up. And we usually get a lot of good feedback from that follow-up. That's really hard data to collect unless you're reaching out to the individual students. Oftentimes, it's financial related, or sometimes it's just the parents change their mind. They're not ready for their kids to go that far away, or they end up staying and going to community college. So there are ways that we can keep track of a lot of that data, and we do look at that quite regularly.
I think one of the concerns I've been talking to some parents, during the school year, of course, at the end of the year, graduation's out, and everyone's rushing to graduate. But some sites may wait till the last minute for the student not to graduate. It becomes a surprise to the parents. It's a big issue. No one has told them along the way that they didn't take the right class. So really what I'm getting from this report is we're going to be doing some more training in those areas to make sure those things don't happen. And I'm referring more to the Paris Lake section of this because it came up in the first page. It's a 172-page report.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hate to see those types of things happen and hear about those instances where the student could have been tracked by the counselor or someone, or we have the training in process so that these things didn't happen.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of systems in place in regards to tracking students, and when students are moved over to the lake. Unfortunately, sometimes there's challenges with the parents not supporting the transition to the lake because it is not a program that we can mandate when students are credit deficient to go over there. It is purely an option for parents to take their kids there. And so sometimes we can have credit deficient students still at the comprehensive site that have 50 credits and have no chance at graduating and are still at the high school. So it can be very challenging sometimes because we know the best scenario for their student is to go to an alternative program so that they can remediate faster and have more opportunities. The lake is on a quarter system where we're on a semester system, so students can get through a lot faster through the quarter system, but it can be challenging to get students to make it over to the lake, for sure.
just move on to item 5.2, business public hearing regarding adoption of the 2019-2020 district budget. And we're opening the public hearing at 5:54.
Okay, well, good evening. Tonight, Alicia and I will present the proposed budget for you. In line with the LCAP is how we present our district budget. Very similar format. We're having a public hearing right now. That's so we can receive input on the budget. Any changes from any input would be brought back before you at the June 19th board meeting. So the way we're going to structure this, we don't have quite as big of a team, but I'm going to cover the state budget proposal, specifically the governor's May revise, and then Alicia's going to tell you how that relates to our school district budget. So that's the plan. Except I haven't been up here in a while to do my own clicking. So starting with the California state budget, as you may or may not know, the May revision is the governor's last statutorily required revision to his 1920 governor's budget proposal, which he first gave to us in January. We then enact our district budget based on that May revision. The final state budget will happen sometime later in June, but not in time for us to adopt our district budget based on that. So there were strong April tax revenues, and Governor Newsom was able to maintain most of his proposals from his January governor's budget and invest additional funds into programs that he has designated as a priority. We do see a commitment from the former Governor Brown's local control funding formula with the inclusion of the statutory COLA to all school districts. And then the education budget continues those proposals from January, but with some important changes and additions, and we will go over those. Also, keeping with the big picture, keeping with his predecessor, Governor Newsom is practicing with cautious optimism. I kind of like that phrase because that's kind of where we're at in the district now. We talked about this a lot last year. Once the GAP funding was closed and we became a COLA-only environment, we have to look a little bit closer at our budget as we make decisions. And so while the May revision projects increased short-term revenues, it also forecasts slower economic growth and intensified risks. And so we're going to talk about what those will look like for our district. The May revise stopped short of predicting a recession, but it also acknowledges the state needs to be prepared for the possibility of a moderate recession. I should probably stop and point out here, it's never my goal or Alicia's goal to stand up here and present doom and gloom or present the worst possible picture. But we do need to present the facts to the board and present a conservative budget based on what we know. So just kind of keep that in mind overlaying. The May revision does allocate funding to pay down unfunded retirement liabilities. That's a good thing for school districts, eliminate debts, reverse deferrals, and build budget reserves. An important thing for us to keep in mind is it also includes in the May revision a deposit to the state's rainy day fund of about $1.2 billion. And you probably remember that as we've talked in the past about the cap on district reserves. So if you remember in 14-15, the Budget Act included, it was a last minute provision actually, to cap school district reserves if certain conditions were met. There were 4 conditions. And if all those conditions were met in the following year of any deposit into the Prop 98 reserve, then districts would be forced to keep their reserves at no more than twice the state minimum level. So our minimum level is 3%. The cap on reserves would then, if triggered, would be 6%. 6% as a district is what we've always targeted anyway. 3% is just way too low. It's just a couple of weeks of operating expenditures. But the issue here is when the cap on district reserves will be triggered, that 6% includes, like we're opening up a high school soon, right? We've got to prepare for that. And so that kind of ties our hands, your hands as a board as we plan for things that we know are happening in the future. So all 4 criteria have been met. Therefore, the May revision anticipates a deposit into the Prop 98 reserve of $389 million for 1920. But fortunately for us, given the criteria I just talked about with that 6% being crippling, that deposit falls short of the 3% level. Therefore, the cap on district reserves will not be triggered for 2021 because remember, it's a year later. But we need to pay attention to this because it's now getting to be only a matter of time to where those cap on district reserves will be triggered. So you'll probably hear us talking a lot more about this in our ongoing presentations. So, some good news, more good news. As you remember from the January proposal, there was one-time Prop 98 funds that were put into CalSTRS. Those funds have been increased with the May revision. There's a little bit more money going into CalSTRS. And again, it's one time, so it's a little bit of relief for us. Certainly not enough, but it's moving in the right direction, right? Special Education School Readiness Grant. Before you read ahead, let me start with the bad news. Our district does not qualify for this. I know you know this. So the May revision does continue to propose a new categorical program, although it is under a different name, Special Education School Readiness Grant. You can kind of see there some of the criteria, but what I will mention that is only about a quarter of the districts qualify for this. There's two qualifying factors. Your unduplicated pupil count, it needs to be 55% or higher, so we check that box. But then your special education enrollment as a percentage of your total district enrollment has to be above 10.93, which is currently the statewide average. So we fall below the statewide average there, though just barely. And so we, along with 75% of the other school districts, do not qualify. As you might imagine, the governor's administration is facing a lot of critics as it relates to this proposal. There's two alternate proposals out there, and I should back up. The critics are the districts like ours, right? The districts that stand to benefit the additional almost $15,000 per student. They're certainly not complaining, but we're hoping for a solution that gives us a little bit closer to adequate special education funding. So this is just a quick summary table of the differences in the January budget versus the May revision. As we've seen in the last few years, there really aren't a whole lot of differences. Our LCFF gap funding does go down just a little bit, and you'll see that reflected in the COLA. The COLA goes down from 3.46% to 3.26%. It's relatively minor, but it is a decrease. The Prop 98 minimum funding guarantee, you can see those changes over the years there. Again, there's the special education proposal. It's still in the budget, though a little bit different from January. And then, as I mentioned before, the CalSTRS proposal. I did skip over a line, the one-time discretionary funds. One of the things we've been seeing for the last, I think, about 4 years is when property tax revenues have gone up towards the end of the fiscal year, therefore increasing the Prop 98 guarantee. That would come back to us the next year as one-time funds. That is not proposed still in May, just like it was not in January. So this is just another chart showing the difference in Proposition 98 funding, the blue being the January budget and the May being the May revision. So we're not seeing a whole lot of changes, just like we've not in the last few years. And then the road to LCFF implementation. I think we've talked a lot about gap funding and how that plays into our budget projections in past years. But last year when we stood up here for our adopted budget presentation, this exact time last year, we talked about, okay, now we are fully funded. So we're not getting COLA plus this large source of revenue in our gap funding. And so that of course continues on in the multi-year projections. And so what that means, and you may hear a lot, is now we're in the COLA only years. That's how we refer to it anyway. And so I wanted to take just a little bit of time and talk about that because particularly for districts like ours that have a high unduplicated pupil count, higher than 70%, we enjoyed a handful of years with really substantial revenue increases. Now, that's not that we weren't due those revenues. I mean, schools are severely underfunded. I don't think anyone would have an argument contrary to that. But we received a lot of increased funding year over year. And now that we're at COLA only, the things that we all have to pay very close attention to is that the automatic increases that are part of our budget every single year. And what I mean by automatic increases, I'm not talking about like, the electric bill goes up, though that is part of it. But the big costs are the retirement costs, CalSTRS and CalPERS rates that we have to contribute into on behalf of every single one of our employees. Step increases, column movements for our teachers, health and welfare costs continue to rise. And then contributions to our restricted programs, primarily special education costs, and we've talked a lot about that. I think we spent a lot of time on special education at our first interim when we were looking at our increases in contributions, our increases in students with disabilities over a 5-year period. And so I'm not trying to pick on you, Emil, but it is it is a reality that our special education costs continue to rise exponentially year after year. And so we just have to be cognizant of that. I mean, sometimes we'll hear from people, oh, you're getting a 3.26% COLA. You know, the natural inclination for people who are not in the details or in the weeds, like I would even say the board is, right? Think, okay, that means we're going to put a 3.26% increase on the salary schedules, but there's all of the other costs that we have to consider as well. And so we just have to keep in mind that our on the natural increases are not, for a while, going to keep up with COLA. Yes. Yeah, that's correct. And those numbers don't correlate in terms of an overall increase to the budget, but I'm going to make something up here, but a 12% to the overall cost just of health and welfare might equate to a 0.5% of the overall budget. So I just didn't want to make it sound as grim as someone may interpret that. Moving on, and so what do we have to look at when we do our multi-year projection? There's a lot of wheels, a lot of moving parts. We have to remember projections are not predictions. What we show you here today is not going to look like what your unaudited or your audited actuals look like when we are here a little over a year later. But we have to keep in mind the assumptions that we make today the decisions that we make today are going to affect how we can build our multi-year in the future. So we have to be careful to make careful decisions. Our projections will change as various factors change. I mentioned we're building our budget on the May revise. When the state budget comes out towards the end of June, if there's significant changes, we'll be revising our budget. Either way, we'll be revising our budget at first interim and at second interim and multiple other times throughout the year. But a slowing economy and rising costs pose challenges to the multi-year projections, which you're going to see when Alicia, again, not trying to pick on you, Emil, but we stole this slide here as well as the last one from School Services of California. But this is just really telling because I think it would be real simple for a person to say, well, is Emil not doing a good job? Did Cindy not do a good job? And that's not the case. When we look at our students with disabilities, if you look at the chart over to the left, you can see that it's growing exponentially. But what's even more telling is the students with disabilities in the infant to 5 years old. So they're growing as early learners much faster than they used to. And then that, of course, translates to then becoming, our middle and high school students. So you've got quite a challenge there on your hands. And so what should be our budget considerations? Again, revenue increases in COLA-only years following those large increases that I talked about. It's going to be more difficult for PUHSD and other districts with a high unduplicated count to navigate following those large increase years. We need to plan for expenditure reductions in some areas because our new revenues are not going to cover our new costs. And then, as I was mentioning before, our multi-year projections are going to be vital to the fiscal health of the district. Well thought out long-range planning, Liberty High School startup, both one-time and ongoing costs are now worked into our multi-year projections. When we stood up here last year, at this time, you remember seeing all of those detailed out. Probably, if you remember, they were all detailed out in the ending balance. They are still either in the ending balance or actually budgeted because we now know it's opening, and so we have to plan for that. And then we have to watch our reserve levels because we need to make sure we have an adequate reserve level to meet those multi-year projections and any challenges that may come up. So with that, unless you have any questions about the California state budget, I will invite Alicia up to tell you how that translates to our district budget. Okay, hearing none.
So this is the extremely riveting part of the whole presentation, including LCAP. So as usual, we'll start with the base grants from 18-19 and then add the COLA that was in the May revise to come up with the new base grants per grade span, and then add the CTE grade span adjustment for our high schools to then add on to the high school base adjustment. And then the supplemental concentration numbers are based strictly on our district, which our 3-year rolling average is 72.5%. If you remember from the first interim, this is actually down from what we were in previous years. We were over 74%, but we went down drastically in 18-19. So next year, it looks like it will be about 71% unless we're able to increase that number in this coming year. So our average that we receive per student is $11,670 if they were to attend every single day. That average is based off of, because not every student qualifies for supplemental concentration. So this chart you've seen in many of the presentations. This is just historically our enrollment to ADA. And if you recall, in the first interim, we increased our ADA to meet with the board and district goals of 93.18% and then going up to over 94% and then 95% in the out years. Since we didn't meet that, this year we were at 92.45%. I projected actually going up to 92.96%. That assumes a 15 ADA growth from the last Saturday schools that we've had. So hopefully that comes to fruition, so I don't have to readjust the revenues on unedited actuals. But we brought that back down to 93% in order to be more conservative. Just because we would love to have a growth in both enrollment and ADA, but we also need to be conservative and probably a little bit more realistic and see if those numbers come to fruition before we keep projecting outward that we'll keep going up. That's okay.
To do this to you. Can you go back to the last one? So for next year, we're projecting, started with a P, a 0.75% enrollment increase and then 1% in the years out from there. One of the things we talked a lot about, Felicia and I, and as the cabinet, we know there's a lot of kids that should be coming in our district, and as you know, we've been working really hard on a marketing campaign to get them here. We're preparing to open a high school that we know, or we hope, will be full. But as it relates to our general fund projections, we have to go with what the historical data shows us. That's not only the most conservative thing for us to do and to look at, even though we want to hire ADA to enrollment, we want more kids, to show up every day and just in general. The county wouldn't approve our budget, if we weren't basing our projections, based on historicals. But I wanted to make sure to touch on at least what the growth percentage is in this budget.
And with the opening of the 10 classrooms at Paloma and reopening up those boundaries, we're really hoping that we'll see a much greater increase in enrollment. So this slide just shows, and again, you've seen this before, the difference or the total cost for the 8-year total of what the STRS and PERS increases have done. If you notice, from 18-19 to 19-20, it does go down, and that is because the governor did allocate $3.15 billion to pay down the STRS. The legislator at the Senate and the Assembly have both put in their budget proposals for those as well. They differ a little bit, but both are adding to it, so those numbers might go down a little bit more. It's just kind of a wait and see. And again, if the overall budget changes significantly, we'll bring that back to you sooner than first interim. If it's not overall a huge difference, then we'll present the budget update at first interim. So for our district, even though we know about these things, these statutory increases for step and column, health and welfare, and the STRS and PERS overall is just over $3 million, which is significant. And, we're not the only districts that are facing those increased costs, but it's important to know what those are. Although we do know about them, it is significant, so we need to recognize that. Other costs that go up on the natural, such as the utilities and copiers and those types of things, we didn't include here. They're not quite as significant as just over $3 million, but those things do still go up. Not necessarily covered by the COLA. So this is just a summary of our budgeted expenditures by major category in both unrestricted and restricted and then combined. So you can see with each line item where those costs are going. Just as a total for salary benefits for the employees equate to about 81% of our entire budget. And so this is the projection assumptions that were used to build this budget. We went over most of these. I just thought I'd point this out so that way you could kind of see the 0.25% that Candace was talking about in enrollment growth, and then doing 1%, and then the 93% across the board. And again, hopeful those numbers will come up, but in order to build a conservative budget to keep us fiscally solvent, felt we needed to be more conservative. And it does also include some reductions that we either have identified or will need to identify if everything stays the same. So if more enrollment doesn't happen, or ADA doesn't increase, or unduplicated count doesn't go up, then those are things that we'll need to address in the out years. So this is just a look at our budgeted revenues by both unrestricted and restricted, based on the assumptions that we've talked about. And so we're looking at a total of $129 million in both the combined revenues. And you can kind of see the contributions there of $18.6 million. The majority of that is special ed. Sorry, Emil. You'll get used to this. With our estimated actuals, again, that does include, us being able to make up some ADA with those last Saturday schools. We'll see how that shakes out at the end when we run our final numbers and adjust our P2 numbers. And so it looks like, even all throughout the years that we're ending, with more than the statutory requirement of a 3% reserve. Just like you to keep in mind that that does include some cuts in the out years. And then this is just a summary of the components of the unrestricted general fund balance and where those monies have been allocated. Of course, a big priority is opening up Liberty High School. We would not ever want to have a brand new building with nobody in it. That would be very sad, and I don't think Menifee would be very happy with us. So this is just kind of a summary of where all of those dollars lie. And so you can see at the top, we definitely meet our 3% reserve, and then being able to open up that high school. And this is just a summary of all of our other funds and how each fund has ended the year, how we're projecting they're going to end for estimating balances with the beginning balances that we estimate for 1920. And so the unrestricted general fund, which we've gone over kind of in detail, would be the $8.4 million, the restricted $2.5 million, the charter school $2.5 million, the cafeteria $1.4 million, the building fund $92.6 million, capital facilities fund $4.1, the school facilities fund, county school facilities fund $1.2, and the debt service just over $1,000. So our next steps. The board will open a public hearing to receive input on the district's budget. A final budget will be presented to the board for approval on June 19th, with hopefully very little LCAP changes. The district's adopted budget, along with the district's local control accountability plan, will be reviewed by our COE. We've had many overviews with them already. After the California state budget is adopted, the district's budget will be revised and presented to the board for approval if necessary, and again, if that's a significant change to what we've already presented to you. The district will continue to monitor enrollment ADA as a percentage of enrollment and special ed expenses, and additional budget reductions will be identified if the state and district budget position is not improved. Are there any questions?
I have a question. It's not technically related, we can say, to the overall. It's just, I'm just wondering about some data. If you go to slide number 20,
Okay.
my question is, it seems that when we use restricted funding, the employee benefits are higher, because when we use unrestricted, and I guess the question is why, right? Certificated, as you can see, certificated salary is 43. We round it off to 45. It's almost 44. Classified salary is 15. So together, unrestricted funded is almost $60 million, right? And the employee benefits is 21 million, so roughly 1/3. When we use restricted, certificated is almost 10, let's say, and classified 5, put it together is 15, and the benefits are 10.
So this is,
It's like.
it's kind of
more
a
than
simple
seven.
explanation, but a not a simple explanation.
Uh-huh.
So the bulk of that is what's called STRS on behalf. So we have to recognize our proportionate liability from the state. So basically what that is it's a calculation that we get from both our county and CDE, and we put in this fancy formula, and it tells us what our proportionate share of the STRS cost is. And so we recognize that in a 3,100, which is the benefits why you see it so much higher, but we also recognize it on the revenue side. So together it's a wash. Where it does impact districts is with our 3% required reserve, because it increases that amount, and also our 3% required transfer to routine repairs and maintenance. So because we have to recognize that as an expense, it does increase both of those requirements, but that's why you see such a discrepancy
There's a
in
huge
what the total
discrepancy.
benefits is, because our STRS on behalf for the restricted, well, because it recognizes all of it, it goes into a restricted resource, 7690. It's over, it's nearly $4 million. Was that the simple explanation? That was the simple explanation. In my world.
That makes sense. Well, not really to me, right? But I know that
Sorry.
it makes sense. It should make sense, yeah.
So, and essentially, the calculation that Alicia is talking about is a calculation based on unrestricted and restricted salary costs, but then it's booked in the restricted side.
Right.
So you're right, it does look funny because it looks like the benefits are so much higher as it relates to unrestricted or restricted salaries,
Restricted.
but it really relates to both.
Okay. All right.
Maybe a little better.
Yeah, they're better. Thank you.
Every district has to recognize it, though, as their proportionate share.
You can ask Paula about that.
Were there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments at this time? Going once, twice? All right, so at this time, we're going to be closing the public hearing at 6:22.
It's the same one.
We have to vote?
Do we need to close?
So you want me to go back? Okay, I'll go back. Do I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Mr. Nielsen? Dr. Freeman? Any discussion? No? Please vote. At this time, item 5 is a 5-0 vote, and we'll be closing the public hearing at 6:23 PM. Item 6.1 is an action item, is that correct? It's an action. Business consideration of resolution number 32 for the 18-19 approving the amended and restated school facilities funding and mitigation agreement. Is there a thank you.
Second.
All right, Mr. Nelson and Mr. Freeman. Any discussion? Please vote.
I did have a question.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering what the status was on
Army Corps of Engineers approval process?
So the developer received the permit on Wednesday, notified us Wednesday night. I do know it's in your weekly update, but, okay, yeah, so, but yeah, so like, we literally just got, got notice of that. So we're excited to finally bring this to you.
Carry on, please vote. Item 6.1 is a 5-0 vote. Item 6.2, business consideration resolution number 33 for the 1819 approving the participation agreement to fund the Wickard Road Sewer Replacement Project.
Second.
Dr. Freeman and Dr. Rao. Any discussion? Please vote. I have to ask. Item 6.2 is another 5-0 vote. Item 7.1 is an adjournment of the special board meeting. Is there a motion?
So move.
Dr. Rao and Mr. Stafford. Any discussion? Please vote. There we go. Item 7.1 is an adjournment, and we will adjourn the special board meeting of the Board of Trustees for June 3rd, 2019 at 6:25 PM.
We have another one.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.